To call the Finance Committee meeting to order. First item on the agenda would be attendance participation. Would you take care of that, make that roll call, Pam, please? Yes, I am.
Here.
Here, thank you.
Here. Thank you very much. We also have joined us Regent Porth, who will be part of this discussion as we go forward. Just briefly, at beginning, I just want to say it's a meeting we called in August where we don't normally meet, but I think it's important because of the situation we're in from a fiscal standpoint primarily. And we know that we have a November 1st deadline to come up with ideas and solutions to this. And if we don't get started prior to that, we are in serious trouble. But I understand through the Chancellor and through others that I've chatted with that there have been meetings going on every couple of weeks and that the CFOs have been working hard to get to the point where they're coming up with plans. This is not today, not a detailed program that we're going to have. We're looking for generalities as to what direction you folks are headed in and what we can expect and how we can get out of this jackpot, because we're going to have the governor, the leadership of the House and Senate, the chairs of appropriations and finance, and important also are the chairs of higher education, seeing that we are headed in the right direction, and I think we are right now as we move forward. Before I begin and before I introduce the Chancellor to say a few words, I would ask if any members of the committee right now would like to say a word before we begin. I knew it. Yes, Sarah.
I just want to say that after multiple conversations, I appreciate everybody being here today to have this meeting with us, to help us feel comfortable about what is happening and how we're all going to work together as a team to get where we need to be. But I think that comes with open communication and dialogue about the things and the best practices that we can also learn from each other too. As we see, other institutions are, just face it, performing much better than others. And how can we help learn from what's happening in, things like that are happening at Central, which I hope Dr. Toro will touch on today, and replicate that at, CT State, to pick on my New Britain friends, because that's what I do. But I just want to say, and thanks to Chair Balducci for helping make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Okay, this time I'd like to turn it over for comments from our Chancellor.
Thank you, Committee Chair Balducci. Thanks to the board, and thank you to Board Chair Ryan, Vice Chair McCarthy, and all our BOR members who are here today. So this morning, happy to provide an update on the work that has been happening since the board approved the FY24 spending plan. At that time, the board charged me to address the system's projected financial challenges for fiscal years 24, 25, and 26. Since then, the system office team and the leadership of our 6 institutions have been working diligently together to address anticipated budgetary shortfalls. We've also been preparing for a comprehensive review of academic and student support programs and examining all other areas of operations. So to be clear, for our regents, as well as anyone watching the live stream or who may view the video later, this is a progress report. No final decisions have been made. The process only truly began in June, and for the past 6 weeks, the work has been happening at the leadership and administrative levels. With the return of faculty, we will enter the next phases of this process. The work will continue through the fall and beyond, because there's no higher priority at any of our institutions or within the system than to ensure the long-term sustainability, viability, quality, and efficacy of this incredible enterprise for which we all, administrators, faculty, and staff, are responsible. The students we serve deserve no less. So we'll do a quick recap of the financial landscape that was reported at the June board meeting, and then highlight a few of the key system-wide activities and initiatives that are shaping our path forward. Then I'll turn over the presentation to each of our institutions' CFOs. Go to slide 3, please. So I hope you can see that on the screen. This is a snapshot of our finances as of June 28th. And so I'll just go through this quickly. You can see that for fiscal year 24, we are projecting approximately a $13.7 million deficit as a system. But you can also see that per institution, as previously mentioned by Regent Stewart, some of our institutions are faring better than others. You can see that 3 institutions are either in this projecting a surplus for fiscal 24 or at balance. We have 3 institutions that are projecting deficits, the largest being NCT State and Western Connecticut. And there remains $13.5 million at the system office in additional financial support for initiatives at institutions or across the system, which brings us to that 13.7 projected deficit. You can see in fiscal 25 and ultimately fiscal 26, this is where things become very precarious, and thus the need for very intensive, aggressive action to remediate. So all of our institutions for fiscal 25 and fiscal 26 are projecting a significant deficit. So this is why we are here today. We can move forward from this slide. I want to try to stress that at the June 28 meeting, what I said and what I will repeat here is that we're not dealing with a 2-year biennium budget problem. With the anticipation that there will be no increase in state funding, it is irrefutable that significant changes across the system are needed. Even if we were to remain at current funding levels, the path forward would not be sustainable. Demographics of the state and the entire New England Northeast region show only decline in traditional college-age students for the next 2 decades. Changing factors in the labor market and society at large also require higher education to adjust to an ever-evolving landscape. So this is our opportunity as institutions and as a system to change and meet the challenges that lie ahead while continuing to serve our students and our communities at the highest level in new, innovative, and transformative ways. I'm going to talk through what's on this slide here. I'm going to go pretty quickly because I want to try to get to our CFOs. To the system-wide strategies at the system level, I've charged my staff and institutional leadership to take immediate actions that will positively impact the finances of our system and reaffirm our commitment to responsible resource allocation. First is a hiring freeze. Not mean we are shutting down all hiring, but what we've done is put into place additional levels of scrutiny so only positions that are integral to the systems or an institution's core mission and day-to-day operations are approved if funding is available. Additionally, we want our employees to know about an existing opportunity offered by the state. Voluntary schedule reduction program allows permanent employees to adjust their weekly work schedules or opt for intermittent unpaid days off. Those who choose to be a part of the program keep the accrual of benefits, including health and dental insurance, seniority, longevity, and accumulated leave, as if they were maintaining their full-time schedule. Next, while certain events and activities must continue to occur on our campuses and across our system, all faculty and staff are being asked to limit non-essential travel and food purchases. So to that end, we at each institution and at the system will be closely scrutinizing and putting restrictions on such activities. We've begun mapping out an academic program planning process that the board charged us with in June. Academic program planning will allow institutions to work with their faculty and key stakeholders to optimize programs by evaluating outcomes and budgetary impact together. We expect the work to intensify and accelerate as we conduct this planning process across each of our institutions through auspices of shared governance. Academic program planning would not be possible without data. And I can proudly tell you that as a system, we have never compiled and analyzed the amount of data that has been aggregated to date. This and other data will allow for decisions to be made agnostically and objectively for the best interests of our institutions and our students. Other system-wide activities, we're having bi-weekly meetings, as Chair Balducci mentioned. They are occurring at each level of institutional leadership. So CFOs meet with CFOs, provosts are meeting with provosts, and so forth. Further, each institution's leadership team is meeting every 2 weeks with the system office leadership so we can collaboratively and transparently strategize and problem solve for unique institutional needs as well as larger and more encompassing system-wide issues. We are conducting a review of vendor contracts to leverage the purchasing power of the system to identify potential savings. So, for example, we are reviewing our system-wide bookstore management contracts. Through efforts like this, we hope to establish better terms with our vendors that will not only serve our students at a higher level, but also achieve significant savings and other. Regarding enrollment, finally, to help strengthen our finances, I'm asking each of our presidents to redouble their efforts to increase transfer enrollment, improve retention, strengthen existing and create new pipeline partnerships and programs with our K-12 school districts, and to work with industry, state, and community partners to serve the educational needs of their employees and constituents. Like this, we will continue to be the primary engine of social mobility for the state, while also generating new revenue. One of the most exciting initiatives is Complete CCSU, which will launch this fall. It is a collaboration between all 6 CSU institutions and the system office to encourage students who have stopped out in their educational journeys to re-enroll at a CSU institution that best fits their needs and career goals. This is a huge opportunity because in Connecticut, there are more than 370,000 adults with some college but no credential. Complete CT will harness the power of one-on-one student success coaching to help people return to school and complete their studies at one of the 6 CSU colleges and universities. I promise I'm going to stop talking in a second. Before I turn to our institutions for their reports, I'd like to thank the Finance Committee for the opportunity to present the system-wide activities. I've been in higher education for more than 25 years. As a faculty member, as an administrator, I have never seen or experienced the incredible set of challenges that lie before us today. It is daunting, it is beyond daunting, and that responsibility is very heavy, as we all know. But that said, every challenge is an opportunity. That is what we are focused on. Meeting today's challenges by making necessary and critical changes and by creating new opportunities that will benefit the state of Connecticut and the tens of thousands of students we serve for generations to come. With that, Regent Balducci, I'd like to introduce our folks from Western Connecticut University as our first presenters.
Thank you, Chancellor Chang. As everyone is aware, I should start by stapling my name, Beatrice Fevry, the WCSU CFO. As everyone is aware, WCSU has had its financial challenges for many years. For example, over a period of 9 years, those challenges drained WCSU's reserve from $24.5 million in FY 2012 to minus $2.3 million in FY 2021. The COVID years of 2020-2021 expedited WCSU's issues to the surface, the COVID reveal, and heightened the need for WCSU to change course. This urgency led to the hiring of an outside consultant, the National Center for Higher Education Management System. NCHEMS shed light to many systemic issues that needed to be addressed, and WCSU has stepped up to the challenge of addressing its systemic issues to the point where it was able to end FY22 with a positive reserve of $1.4 million. What follows are some steps that WCSU continues to make as it seeks to recover. So it shed light on 3 areas. One is the budget projections, FY24 to 26. 2, the initiatives of revenue growth, that is strategies for increasing enrollment in academic offerings. And the third piece that we will share is expense stabilization, reduction strategies that are ongoing. On the budget projections, as stated by President Chang in his presentation, Chancellor Chang in his presentation, The FY 2024 budget that was submitted to BOR on 6/28/23 showed a projected deficit of minus $12 million that is driven by the loss of about $30 million in revenue, driven by non-recurring ARPA funds and previous fringe benefits paid by the state. The projected deficit for FY 25-26 is minus $21.6 million and minus $25.2 million, respectively. These preliminary numbers indicate that WCSU's road to recovery is steep, with a lot of work requiring strategic and immediate attention. We continue to monitor enrollment and housing numbers, which are both trending at this point at a minus 6% than what was budgeted on that 6/28 BOR document. I will also note that additional students have a pattern at Western to register late. So we are expecting between now and the official third week census date of September 19, 2023, an increase. Hence, these preliminary projections are expected to be revised after the fall 2023 census. We will then have a better understanding for enrollment and housing. Now, as to the second point on revenue growth strategies for increasing enrollment in academic offerings. On the academic side, we've expanded the capacity for online programs. We've secured approval from NECHI to grow our online offerings. We've converted most of our graduate degrees to online delivery and have approval for 2 online undergraduate degrees to be launched in spring 2024. We also anticipate a full evaluation of how to effectively integrate online learning into undergraduate program this academic year. When complete, the results should improve student outcomes and reduce classroom space demands. We've also added the following degrees programs to reflect shifting interest and workforce demand. A BS in Health Promotion and Management, which has been a great recruiting tool. BS in Popular Music, which has been approved but not yet launched. A BFA in Theater that is already recruiting strongly and projected to reach the enrollment cap of about 16. Currently we are seeking state approval for an accelerated post-bachelor's RN degree, which is anticipated to be launched in 2024. We also anticipate the development of 3 new undergraduate degrees this year to launch in 2024. Also changed the names of 2 programs to better communicate their value. We've changed our BA in biology to BS in biology because that's what resonates in market demands. We've also, the BS in Health Promotion Studies has been converted to BS in Public Health. So the fall of 2022 retention rate for Western was 74.5%. Graduation rate, 53%. The following will help increase both the numbers. We are expecting to increase both these numbers with the following. We have a new university advising program model. The office is now responsible for the advisement of all incoming first year and transfer students. The advisors will work in teams with financial aid, registrar, cashier, the bursar office, counseling, and the tutoring and resource center to offer individualized assistance. So one person there to connect all the students with all their needs and facilitate onboarding. The students will have a single point of contact for all matters related to their 4-year degree plan, course selection and registration. In year 2, once declared, each student will migrate to a faculty advisor who will become their primary contact. However, each student will always have the resources of the University Advisement Center available for their use. Transfer students. The Enrollment and Student Affairs Division was recently given managing control over all endowed awards previously controlled by the WCSU Foundation. These funds should enable us to further impact retention and recruitment. The admissions staff has increased their outreach to our CT state campuses to recruit additional transfer students. The new University Advisement Center is facilitating the onboarding and registration of all new transfer students. Now we have also an enrollment recruiting tool, OTHOT, OTHOT. Using data analytics derived from our OTHOT platform, we are making targeted decisions on recruitment markets and outreach for fall 2023. There has been an increase in our total applicant pool and total admit pool over the last 2 recruitment cycles. Our focus is now on increasing the yield of converting admitted students into enrolled students. The OTHOT program identifies targeted students where financial aid will make the most impact in converting admitted students to enrolled students, hence maximizing our limited resources to enroll the most students. Now about expense stabilization and reduction strategies, which are ongoing at WCSU. WCSU is continuing to evaluate enrollment and degree completion rates as part of its program review process. Over the last 5 years, this has resulted in about 6 program closures. The BA in American Studies that closed and is in teach out in progress. The BA on Earth and Planetary Sciences, which is closed and in teach out progress. The BA in Social Sciences, students have moved to related majors. The MS Earth and Planetary Sciences closed, which is teach out is complete. The MA in English also closed, teach out is complete. The MS Education closeout, teach out is in progress. We now have also some programs that have been parked for thorough review, about 3 programs, the MA in Mathematics, the MS in Music Education, and the MS in Nutrition. We also have 4 programs that are going under review and have been identified for revision. Those programs are still anthropology, sociology, economics, political science, and meteorology. Over the course of 2023, 2024, we anticipate continued analysis of programs with reference for student demand, regional employment needs, and the overall balancing of the academic opportunities available in our region. Now for expense reduction, attrition, delay, filling vacancies, and hiring freezes. We have been following that. As stipulated by President Chang, additional level of scrutiny has been added in this process at Western. We have, we've instituted a hiring freeze, but we've also activated a position review committee that meets regularly to discuss, review staffing hiring positions critical for operations. Notice went out to the university community regarding limiting expenses, including travel and food, as has been discussed. We continue with our SWOT analyses are being performed and processes are being reviewed for efficiency and effectiveness. We are reviewing current provider contracts and moving to consortiums and other providers where savings are identified. We have, for example, amended our Sodexo contract, which led to savings of over $1.2 million in FY23. So to conclude, as WCSU continues on its path to rebuild and restore financial stability, the university community remains committed to successfully address its challenges now and to take appropriate steps to prepare for what lies ahead in this ever-changing world. We recognize that it is imperative for us to continue operating efficiently in order to be effective, and also the need to invest in order to attract and retain more students. This concludes WCSU's report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. That's rather detailed, and hopefully the notes that I've taken, getting to accomplish it, I hope is something that happens in the near future. Thank you. I would ask members of the committee now if they have any questions. Yes, Aaron?
Just out of curiosity, so you said that you ended the last fiscal year with a $1.4 million surplus, right?
FY22.
22.
Correct.
So now you're projecting these deficits in $20 million ish coming forward for fiscal year 25, 26, and 12 million for 24. Where does that gap get so big, and why?
The gap, as I mentioned earlier, is over years.
Yeah.
Western has had these high expenses that were not being addressed. Now, when we talk about COVID, just exacerbated. So if you look at the 628, the report that was provided, there is a definite, this is the report on attachment E. On the last BOR meeting, you will see a column showing the difference in the variance on each line item. And we had income.
It's just mostly decline in enrollment. That's it.
Oh, absolutely. That contributes.
I'm just making sure, I want to know that that's like the lion's share of it. It's just not enough enrolled students.
Chair Balducci, would you mind if I address this,
Please.
my perspective? So I'm Paul Barron. I'm the outgoing chair, and I look forward to handing it over to Dr. Singh in a couple of days. I want to first of all thank the board for and particularly Chancellor Cheng in investing in me over the last year. This has been a hard year for everyone at Western. But I want to answer that question specifically from what I saw when I walked in the door. And I'm not, I'm an old English teacher, so I just really only have two numbers, one and many. And so what I saw when I walked in the door was the fact that there was, what happened was a projection of hope where there was none every year. And so every year, if you project you're going to have a 1% growth and you have a 1% loss, but you have set your budget of 1% growth, then you can support those 5-person classes. You can support activities artificially because you're dipping into your reserves. And the bottom line is, it's a very simple story. The reserves got dipped into for about 9 years over the course of 2 of my predecessors. And that's what happened, and that's where it lay. And the second thing that happened, when I took the position and I started interviewing people while I was still living in Arkansas at that point, and I called my vice president here, and I said, "So Beatrice, I'm looking at the budget. It appears to me, and I'm looking at the organization of the institution. And it appears to me that 7 or 8 people had spending authority and no money, which they spent anyway, and then sent the bill to you. Does that sound right?" She said, "Yes." So what I want to say here is that what we have done over this last year is the first thing I did was recognize that that as a president, I couldn't have 16 people reporting directly to me, with half of them having budget authority and no money. So the first thing I did was I rearranged and reorganized the institution into 3 vice presidents, under which everybody else answers, with a few exceptions. At that point, we were able to start to institutionalize restraints on our budget, manage the budget, mete out the money, and know where it's going. So that's why we had a $1.4 million savings this year, because that's what we were saving. So it's really, we can talk about dollars and we can talk about strategies till the world is flat. But the bottom line is, and I've run 3 other universities in a system. So I've sat in this chair a lot, and and to Chancellor Cheng's credit and benefit, he understood what I was telling him, and he let me manage this, make choices about leadership, and now that's in place. And now we have strategies that are going to have to make some more very, very hard decisions. But the other thing I will say is, part of the problem with our budget is that we have many people who are at the very highest end of the pay scale in the, particularly in the faculty area. And And, in order to get to the bottom line of this, we're not going to, no, this institution is not going to be able to climb out of it by, lifting ourselves up by our own petards. It's not going to happen. There's going to have to be an opportunity to offer people who have longstanding uh, roles in the institution who are ready to retire, offer retirement incentives, and lower the budget in those kinds of ways. If you lower, if people retire, a 25, 30-year person retires, you're going to save somewhere between 300 to $500,000 a year every year from then on. That is going to have an impact on the budget in a significant and serious way. So I'm just, I'm on my way out, and I don't want to overspeak. Dr. Singh has to manage this, but it's straightforwardly, it's a really simple thing. We're doing all the right stuff organizationally, but it's going to be very difficult to get to that positive bottom line without side intervention because of the pay structure that we're currently in.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Any other comments by members to Western? I think first of all, you mentioned something that deals with labor, and we certainly aren't getting any of those kinds of things, but I'm sure that there'll be discussions and whatever to help make things better at your university and also the others in the colleges too. Thank you for that, and thank you for your
I've
service.
experienced great faculty at my institute.
Thank you for that. Hey, note.
Sorry. I'm used to being the one that runs these things.
You're not running.
I know. I just want to say thank you for your honesty, for your candor. I appreciate that. I think that's what we're looking for too. And to hear, just with no sugarcoating where the problems are, because it makes it, at least for me, easier for me to understand how we got to this point. And as someone who's somewhat new on here, I'm still learning that. So thank you. And thanks for what you've done to try to right the ship.
Okay, moving on to Central Connecticut State University.
I'm Lisa Busher from Central Connecticut State University.
Um,
Is it on? Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Lisa Busher from Central Connecticut State University, and I'm glad that we were able to present some updates since the July or the June projections. CCSU is currently projecting a balanced budget in fiscal year 24 and 25 and very preliminary deficit approximately 3.5 to 4.9 million in fiscal year 26. CCSU will continue to look for opportunities to produce alternative revenue sources and refine our efforts on increasing enrollment and retention, as well as increasing fiscal savings where possible to mitigate any deficit in fiscal year 26. Some cost-containing strategies that have been ongoing at Central. CCSU, as you may be aware, has been committed to ensuring financial stability for many years now. We instituted a hiring freeze process in fiscal year 21, which remains in place today. That process consists of rethinking positions as they become vacant from resignations or retirements. Only positions critical to the organizational needs, day-to-day operations, and within our budget have been approved. We've implemented change of course offering cycles, reduced the number of options or tracks within academic programs, review of academic student support services for relevancy and effectiveness. We capitalize on synergies among academic programs, and some revenue enhancements that we are noticing now for fiscal year 24. Increased enrollment is projected around 2% compared to a conservative flat budgeted amount, which yields roughly $1.1 million additional to what was actually presented at the June numbers. And then fiscal year 24 increased housing occupancy also is now projected at 2,200 versus the 2,000 students in housing at the budgeted number, which adds roughly about 2.6 to $3 million extra to our projections for fiscal year 24. Our first time full-time fall 2023 goal was 1350, and it is currently around 1424. So we're exceeding our first time full-time goal. Our retention projected rate is expected to increase from 76.5%, the class returning in fall 2022, to 79.2% for the fall 22 class returning this fall, which is a significant increase of 2.7%. The latest projections, based on the information that was just talked about, are now for fiscal year 24, we're projecting a surplus of $17 million. For fiscal year 24, 25, 2.1 million surplus, and fiscal year 26, 3.5 to 4.9 deficit, which the shift there assumes an additional 100 students in housing. Other initiatives that are in progress or refining or completed include expanding our market for enrollment by being deliberate about our approach, personalized approach and outreach to schools. We implemented Campus ESP, which allows us to keep in contact with current and prospective parents to help them navigate the campus experience. We implemented Civitas Scheduler to help build class schedules. We're refining Slate software implementation for continued improvement for recruitment and retention. We're creating the College of Health and Rehabilitation Services and other new academic programs. We're optimistic that the increases in enrollment and housing, along with all the additional initiatives we have in progress or completed, will enable CCSU to continue to move to a financial stable position. And that concludes our update, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? I have one. Did you project over the next 3 years, and maybe I didn't hear you clearly, pluses over 24, 5, and 6, as opposed to
Not 26. 26, we're projecting
24, 3, 4, and 5?
yes, 3, 4, and 5. Absolutely. Yes.
For me, because I'm looking at different numbers down below.
So for 23, it's not on the sheet, but for 23, we're projecting, we had submitted a budget of 10.9 million surplus, and now we're looking at 13.7 to 14 million surplus for 23. 24, we're currently projecting a $17 million surplus.
17 million
Yes,
in 24.
yes. And 25, 2.1 million versus the negative 4.7 originally projected in June.
Terrific. Thank you for that. And I had another one on retention. You say you had a 6.5% increase in retention?
0.7.
Number before that, you gave a 6%.
It went from 76.5% to 79.2.
I missed the 76. Okay. Thank you. Other questions by members of the committee? Yes. Rich.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, you are to be commended for the question has to do with,
Sorry.
thanks. Have you managed the budget responsibly, but also in a way that allows you to fulfill our basic mission? Academic progress, adequate support services, retention initiatives, and so forth.
I will, if I may, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Sherman, answer this question because the process we have in place started before Lisa took over as our finance and budget leader. What happened was that in July 2020, you remember we were in the middle of the pandemic. The then CFO and I started looking at the landscape and what was the impact of the pandemic in higher education. And we looked at the vacancies we had and the people who were retiring or resigning at that time. And I made the decision because I told my team that the effect of the pandemic were going to last at least 5 years. And I made the decision after conversations with everyone to cut $13.1 million from the base budget. It was painful. We have some people here who has experienced that. But we didn't let go anybody. The cuts were made based on unfilled positions and thinking and considering the drop in enrollment in certain programs. Okay? At that time, because of instruction from the system office, we had in place a hiring freeze, which we have not changed since then. So we have had a hiring freeze that has required what Lisa just described. Every area have to rethink the position. Every area have to show us that that position is relevant and will serve the students in the 21st century. If that is not the case, then the position is not approved. Then the hiring salary is at the lowest possible, depending of our union contracts and so forth. So it's not only about the hiring fees, it's about the way we pay people. I know that my friends in SWOF sometimes have disagreements with us because of that, but that is a responsible way to manage our finances. We have, at the same time, continue our investments in strategic areas. Every investment we make is tied and linked to our strategic plan. We have metrics for each one of the goals, 5 goals in our strategic plan, and we have a shared governance process that we use to approve those additional investments that will help retention and recruitment. Those are the 2 things that every new investment has to support: retention and recruitment of our students. That's what has led us to be able to increase retention. And we have a number of new programs in place for retention purposes, but also has allowed us to increase enrollment. We are looking, as Lisa mentioned, at around 2% enrollment increase for fall. We have at the same time been able to launch new academic programs. And we have a number of new academic programs in the pipeline for which we have the faculty lines in place.
Any other questions? Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I just want to point out if there's one indicator that I pay a great deal of attention to and have for a long time, it's the student retention indicator. And as all of you folks on these parts of the tables know, an 80% retention rate, which you're practically there, is a very, very strong retention rate. And it doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of taking the right steps every time you have a chance. I just want to congratulate you for very, very close to an 80%. Get there sometimes. That's a great, that to me, that's the indicator. It reflects student success and it reflects the faculty and staff doing the right things.
And that's the other comment, if I may, I want to make. This has been a team effort. Painful, definitely. We have some witnesses here, but it has been a team effort because the faculty has been willing to work with us. The staff has been willing to work with us, and the students as well. We have a lot of student workers, orientation leaders that are making the environment central, welcoming for all. And again, the administrators, I cannot ask for a better leadership team of the university. It has taken us 6 years to get here, but we are there.
Other questions?
Dr. Toro, congratulations. 6 years ago when you came on, I know I was one of those people that was like, what is she doing and what is going on? She fired all my friends. Um, that is true. But to see the numbers today, I mean, it's proof that your strategies and that these things work. One of the things that just stuck out to me, you mentioned your own internal academic review. Do you have your own committee that does that? Is that you personally? Is that a requirement in higher ed that each institution have that? I don't know. I'm just curious because I'm impressed with that because I also know how much you've done with revamping a lot of the programs that Central offers, and I think that's been a big piece with keeping relevance.
No, that process comes from the faculty. The faculty owns curriculum, but we have implemented a number of initiatives to motivate faculty to do that. For example, the Next Gen grant program that allows faculty to apply for funds to make changes, not only to the curriculum, but to add elements to the curriculum that are in the area of high impact practices, for example. So that's one. But in terms of new programs that come from the faculty as well, but every new academic program proposal requires a market analysis to convince the University Planning and Budget Committee that we should invest in that, and also the Integrated Planning Council. It's a shared governance endeavor.
That's great. Thank you.
Before we move on, just quickly, Elise, you mentioned a 2% increase, as did the president just now, of enrollment, and also an increase in housing. And if I had the numbers right, you're talking almost $5 million between the two of them.
It's going to be, yes, we're around 3 to 4 million.
Still plus, no brackets.
Absolutely. From what we budgeted, yes.
Any other questions by members? Thank you very much for your input, and thank you very much for your comments to the board. Moving on to Southern.
Then we have to
Lisa.
switch the room.
That's right. Thank you. I'm looking up and I'm saying, he's not at Southern. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. And I apologize for that. I know. Thank you for that. Any comments or questions here? Jim, I'm sure you'll have a comment about retention. I would,
83%. I mean,
you know,
it's
pretty, pretty darn good. I didn't hear enrollment, and maybe I missed part of that. Comment on enrollment at Eastern. Well, what? Expecting increases. Comments? Karen?
Jim, it seems you're in a very, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, it seems you're in a really great position with Eastern. The only thing I just wanted to just confirm was that you're not projecting deficits until fiscal year 25 and 26. Is that correct? Great. Thank you.
That's a big one. Thanks, Jim. Thank you very much. David? Done, David, thank you. Other comments? Jim, thanks again. We appreciate you taking the time. Oh, I'm sorry, Rich.
Real quick, the different measures you just described for us, has it resulted in a reduction in the projected deficit for the next couple of years? So they will improve.
Us. Yes, we're going to change
So. Yeah.
Thank you. Now Southern.
Good morning, Chancellor Chang, Chair Balducci. Uh, Thanks for the opportunity to give an update about Southern's position. As per Southern's approved spending plan for the current fiscal year, we've got a projected current surplus of $5.5 million. This is mostly due to a freeze of about 45 positions, reduction of adjunct hiring, a very serious reduction of adjunct hiring, and a reduction of non-contractual faculty reassigned time, also a substantial reduction. It also assumes, because at Southern, we've gotten in the habit over these years of always budgeting essential inputs conservatively. We've assumed a 3% downward adjustment in enrollment and flat housing occupancy for this fall, because that is what past performance for several years has suggested on both counts. We're confident, however, that enrollment this fall will surpass this spending plan estimate, possibly yielding an additional $1.5 to $2 million in tuition and fee revenue this year. Now, this is all prior to census, so it's subject to change. But similarly, our housing occupancy, which was flat the previous year as per budget, now appears to be slightly up with 50 to 75 new occupants and $400,000 to $600,000 in new revenue. So an occupancy of the housing complex appears to be consistently increasing since 2020, and also now is about in the 85% range, which is perfectly respectable for a regional.
Repeat that number again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
The housing occupancy is in the 85% range. So auguring well for the future, full-time students appear to be rebounding. I wish I could say the same about part-time. I think we all wish we could say the same about part-time. Certainly, in the case of Southern, full-time is rebounding. And first-time, full-time undergraduate ranks, which is a very important metric, are what we projected and assumed for the purposes of budget planning that we'd be at 1175, and we're now at 1210. And we also note that retention is expected to increase from 73.2% to 75%. For the future, we're closely evaluating discretionary spending like food and travel, and most importantly, undertaking an academic program review like the others. All of these may yield future savings to mitigate future deficit. Have a very substantial commitment to renewable energy at Southern, a very large scale solar farms. All of our parking garages have solar panels on the roof. We have our new business building is a net zero building in terms of energy use. It has 52 geothermal wells associated with it, heating and cooling. So in any event, we're guided in the future by our new strategic plan, which puts enrollment gains at the forefront of our goals for the next 5 years. We hope to achieve the following: to increase the number of transfer students from CT State by 25% by 2028. To retain 25% of each early college class as matriculating students at Southern. We have several hundred students in early college. It's been a phenomenally successful program, and marketing directly to them is an opportunity we just can't pass up. And we think very clearly that when students in high school come to know Southern's faculty in a Southern class, that they will matriculate at a greater rate in the future. So it's basically a captive pool to market to. We're looking forward to increasing the cohort graduation rate, undergraduate, 1% a year to 60% by 2028. We want to increase the number of new matriculated undergraduate students by 2% annually. That's very, very ambitious for a regional public, especially in New England. But I feel better about it as a goal, seeing what's happening this year about enrollment. So we want to also double the geographic diversity of our enrollment, particularly by expanding the NEBI rate and international recruitment. We'd like to increase the 3-year graduation rate for transfer students to 60%. Finally, we do want to achieve and surpass an 80% retention rate. That is, as we correctly out, the gold standard for regional publics. And there's no reason why Southern can't. Just needs to be a focus. So it will be with this new strategic plan. This is not an all-inclusive list of things. Just the most important in terms of making our numbers. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions by members of the committee? I would rather the increase in transfer students up 25%, that's rather optimistic, or no?
I think it's what I'd call an aggressive goal. But we also have years of building a relationship with CT State and its predecessor institutions behind our belt here. So we feel good about possibility.
Because you're rather unique out of all of the universities. I mean, you have New Haven with several well-known universities there, along with, with Southern, et cetera. So,
Well, they're well-known private universities.
yes,
And,
privates, but
So we've got them beat on price, Mr. Chairman.
that's the positive point I'm thinking of, that price-wise, Southern would be really competitive down there, and it sounds like you're making steps in the right direction. Committee members, comments? Yes.
Thank you. I'm new. What is your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to introduce myself. Mark Rozeski. I'm the Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration at Southern.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. You have some hefty goals for Southern. Heard a lot of hefty goals, and it's great. Goals are awesome. I just want to, make sure that the goals are attainable. That's all. But other than that, I mean, it seems that that you've thought through a lot of what the university can do to be better, and thank you for that.
Other comments by anyone? Yeah.
I'd like to follow up on Regent Stewart's question, and thank you for your presentation. So your goals are aspirational. Some of them are pretty aggressive. How will the budget constraints that we're dealing with now impact your ability to make that progress over the next few years? And I'll ask you the same question. How has your projected deficit changed as a result of your work so far?
Well, I haven't worked the numbers to determine how 26 and 25 and 26 will change as a result of these yet. We're 24, we're doing fine. 24, we have a $5.5 million surplus. According to the spending plan that you approved in June, that's not the way it's looking now. It's looking better now. So interpolating forward will be better. It won't solve the problem. These are large numbers in 25 and 26. But certainly this is going to contribute to approaching that cliff with a little less trepidation.
Others? Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I just want to critical because they're going to be looking better than the annually budgeted expenditures based on what you're seeing so far. So I just want to encourage you, the committee, the system to make sure we get those 3-week census data, at least the critical ones, out as quickly as we can, publicized as quickly as we can, because that's a different narrative than the narrative we've been reading about ourselves and hearing about ourselves. And so I think it's to our great benefit that we get those latest numbers out. And as you just pointed out, Mark, once you have those, you'll be able to make some adjustments. They won't solve 24 and 25, but you'll make some adjustments on those that will make, and it's the trajectory that at this point we're looking at, but it certainly makes 24 look a lot better than we assumed it was going to look not that long ago.
You're absolutely, Jim. The only comment I would make in agreement with that is most of these are still preliminary. And what we're going to need to do is wait September numbers when they're much more solidified, how many students we have, what tuitions we're going to have coming in, housing rates, board, that kind of thing. But that's a great point. Yeah, we will. And I'm sure the governor and Senator Looney and Speaker Ritter and the members of the faculty, the legislature will be happy to see we're headed in the right direction and give us kudos for that as we move forward. This is great. Thank you very
I
much.
hope more than kudos, but that's
Other comments? Moving right along, Charter Row.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is, good morning. It's still morning, and my name is Mike Moriarty. I am the Chief Financial Officer and Vice President for Administration for Charter Oak. And thank you very much for the opportunity to explain to you what's going on in campus. And I appreciate now, I think you have a printout, but can you see the slides behind you on this screen here? Okay, you can. All right. And so what I wanted to do was kind of, much like the others, take you through kind of 3 elements of Charter Oak. I'll give you a little bit of history of where we are with enrollment and finances very quickly. And then what I'll do is talk about our revenue initiatives and then our expenditure initiatives as well. So on the first slide you have in front of you, there's essentially 2 charts. The top chart shows our enrollment over time for the last 5 years. I'm fortunate enough to say that our enrollment has been stable for the last 5 years. It's been relatively consistent. The lines in front of you represent credits, FTE, applications, and there's very little noise there in volatility. And just the one point I'll make on this slide is that at the tail end, you'll see a couple lines that are trending up. Those are applications, and it's also the number of credits we deliver. And so 2 things are going on. I think in the output of the pandemic, there's been a refreshed appreciation for online learning that we didn't see immediately in the pandemic. So the interest is increasing, which is positive for us. At the same time, you'll see that our credits are growing, but our headcount is staying relatively the same. And we have students that are taking more credits. And so just as a reminder to the regents, our average student is late 30s. They are working and they typically take 2 classes a semester. And we've seen that average go up. And so that's financially favorable for us, but it's a shifting demographic for our population. Our student is now trending more closer to 30 years old rather than 40. And so we're trying to stay out in front of that. And that's a different generation that we have to cater to. And so enrollment has been relatively stable with a slight uptick in the current times. The next chart below is really our finance story expressed in ratios. And if you're unfamiliar, I'm going to be very quick on this, but there's 3 ratios, and I need to thank the CSU Controller's Office for putting this together, and they did the math behind the scenes. But the 3 ratios are, the first one is operating margin. Operating margin is very similar to how that sounds. What is the margin on the services you are delivering? And so Charter Oak's story was 5 years ago, we were losing money. And Charter Oak had a division that was really a business to business service model in addition to serving our students. And then over time, we have improved that operating margin by shutting down the business to business programs that we did and solely focusing on our students and our online courses. The national benchmark is 2%. We're sitting at about 4%. And so we feel relatively good about our pricing and staffing levels. The next 2 benchmarks underneath are talk about reserve ratios. One is related to unrestricted net position, which is a term this board hears quite often. The other one is a cash ratio. And really what this chart is demonstrating is that over the last 5 years, Charter Oak has nursed itself back to health to be fiscally stable in the current times. I joined Charter Oak about 6 years ago, and that doesn't mean the credit goes to me. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. But we were in a fairly poor place financially where critical decisions had to be made. Now that we've stabilized ourselves, we now have the opportunity to reinvest in new programs and do new things. So between those 2 items, that is the story of Charter Oak I wanted to just lead into with where we're going with our revenues and expenditures. So if you wouldn't mind on the next slide, please. Really quick on the budget. I'd be amiss if I just didn't explain what happens with our budget this year for things fairly uncontrollable to us. We saw a decrease of our state appropriation of 22%. That is a sizable number, both percentage-wise and dollar amount for Charter Oak. I know it's a small sliver for the system as a whole, but when I look at campus, I need to look at things in proportion. In addition to that, the change in fringe methodology that is occurring through OPM is actually hurting us another $500,000. So we are down 30% from our state appropriation, not even including the temporary ARPA dollars that were defunded. And that was expected, so that was no surprise. The good news is some silver lining of this, and I know OPM has spoken about the fringe change quite a bit, is my math and OPM's math lines up, and they understand how much we are negatively impacted by this change in fringe. So I don't necessarily like that decision, but there's no disputing the math on it. We're in agreement there that Charter Oak is not in as much of a favorable position as we once were. So with that setting this tone for context, I'm going to lead into our revenue and expenditure initiative. So if you wouldn't mind the next slide. All right, and I believe you have a printed copy, and I'm going to gloss over some of these, but I want to talk about the biggest item on this slide, which is back in July, we set a 9% increase in enrollment as our goal on campus to our department heads and staff. And that is not 9% over 3 years, at the end of 3 years, that is 9% each year. And so that is, I forget what Mark said, but whether it's aggressive, stretch, it is certainly an aggressive goal. But when you're faced with such devastating cuts, you need to set aggressive goals. And I would absolutely be amiss if I did not mention, as we were meeting with our senior cabinet on campus, no one threw their hands up thinking this goal is unattainable. They didn't want to work towards it. The campus is rallying around this goal. Now, whether we get there or not is a different story. But there is a lot of effort on campus from all lines and all levels to bring us there and help close this budget gap. And so just I continue to send my kudos to them because people are working very hard. Really quick on these enrollment goals, it comes in two flavors. One, it's about widening the top of the funnel as to the students interested in Charter Oak. And so what that means is we have found success in marketing to industry verticals, whether it's healthcare, early childhood. We do not have the money to develop a national brands like some other national players. That's tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So we look where there's better ROI and we market in those industry verticals, which we have seen success in doing so far. We are fortunate enough that we removed the out-of-state tuition rate through this last cycle, where out-of-state students is a very small fraction of what we do, but there's opportunities there, and I hope those opportunities grow. But to be very truthful, the online marketplace is very saturated. You've probably seen many ads out there nationally, and it's a hard market to work in. And so I still expect the predominant majority of our matriculated students, but that opportunity does exist. Then I mentioned before that just our student demographics are changing. And so our students are younger, and we're looking at that because there's a different set of expectations with different generations. And then the last item on the enrollment piece is just our internal pipeline, where this is about attracting new students to Charter Oak. What about the students who are here, but eventually don't come to Charter Oak? And where do they go and how do we serve those students better? They're already halfway in the door. And so much like, and I'll make this generalization about government, sometimes our processes and our systems are old and they're clunky and they're not smooth. And so this is about looking internally of how do we make sure a student who changes how many classes they register for, how do we make sure they don't have to go through the financial aid process 3 or 4 times in one semester? There's a lot of convolution there. And when we started to look internally, that is not the experience we want to provide, and we want to smooth that out, and that'll help. So that's the 9% enrollment goal. The next things on these slides I'm going to touch on quickly. These are just a couple flavors of some new things we're starting up to essentially experiment with, and we hope in November to bring back to you more credible information on if we were successful or not. One is the Career Invest 5250 program. For those who are unfamiliar, 5250 is the threshold where an employer give tuition benefits to an employee. The employer is not taxed on that, it's deductible, and the flip side of that is that the employee themselves do not get taxed as earnings if an employer puts out 5250 on their behalf. Things above that, there's a different tax treatment. What we started to do was for corporations who are interested in sending their students to Charter Oak, they would pay us 5250 one time only at the beginning of the year, and their employees can consume as many classes as they want at Charter Oak. It makes it very simple for HR departments, and the idea is that that is their investment in their employees. And now, again, typically students will only take 2 courses a semester, adults, but that keeps it nice and simple with our partnerships. That's brand new, scheduled to go live next month. I can't attest to how successful it will be, only because it's a different take on what's known as a third-party letter of credit. Next is grants. The next two, we're talking about grants. And really what this is that Charter Oak has never focused on grants before, and we need to. The money's out there, and we need to start focusing on grants. And the next one, and I noticed when I put these slides together, Career Invest, Career Connect is the next term. Apparently, we like to use the word career, which is great for our college. But we were successful in obtaining a $1.3 million workforce grant. And this was an earn while you learn concept. So we are piloting a program right now, which is completely funded separately, where a student in a non-credit line could come in, we will pay for your laptop, we will pay for your class, and we will pay for you to sit in class. So you're earning money sitting in class. This is completely funded external to Charter Oak. But the concept is when employers are complaining that they cannot find the people to fulfill their open positions, what would it take to drum up interest, to put them in those seats, train them up, and then graduate them so they could go right into the workforce? So this was a partnership with OWS and Hartford Healthcare is involved. This one is off the ground. And I would tell you, if we couldn't sell this, I'm not sure it's viable at all because the students aren't paying anything and getting paid to come. Program has been successful. There's a ton of interest around. It's a lot of excitement. And so that's going very non-credit division I spoke about. This is new for Charter Oak. I need to give a little credit to campus for this group. A group came to me and noted that they would like to try out a non-credit division of the college. We weren't able to afford that internally. And so that request was unfortunately denied. And that group took it upon themselves to research and get external funding to create a non-credit division so we could try that out. So they brought the dollars to me and to campus. And as a CFO, I need to applaud that. If the funding isn't in-house, you found it on your own to get the seed money to try this. And the agreement is when that seed money runs out, if this is economically viable, we will continue the program. And last but not least, on the revenue side, new program development. I mentioned the change in fringe strategy, and some are more familiar than others on this, but just a very quick recap is that going forward, starting this fiscal year, the state will be picking up the retirement fringe cost for our employees. They have clawed back money, so it isn't something that's favorable to us. However, going forward, the cost of developing new programs is no longer going to include retirement fringe. And that was previously 65 cents on the dollar. And that is a huge portion of the cost when we're developing new programs. So now that the cost of new program development is lower, in an environment where, yes, we have to look at cutting our expenses, for programs that were close to the mark that we may not have deployed, when you're kind of for the, I'll say manufacturing folks in the room, when your cost of goods sold is now 30 to 50% less than what it was before, there's new opportunities that we should be looking at there because the cost profile has changed and we're going through that. So really quick, the next slide, and we're going to pivot into expenses real quick. But a quick estimate I put together is if we achieve our 9% growth, all other things fail, this will make us economically stable and financially stable in the wake of these devastating cuts to the college. Just preemptively, I will say our enrollment today is 10.5% up from where we were in the fall. So I could assure you I would not be pushing a 9% enrollment if my update this morning or as of yesterday was significantly less than that. However, we're one cycle into a 3-year cycle, and there's still a lot of work to do, but we think, although it's an aggressive goal, that it's economically viable for us. Okay, last slide, and this is on our expense stabilization strategies. Just going through this quickly is we've identified non-mission critical programs that we intend to close. There's an adult virtual high school that we currently host, and there's a connectability program that we do for some of the state agencies out there. We are working with the constituents now to wind those down, and there's cost savings associated with that. Reduction of academic maintenance costs. Just as a reminder, we do have full-time faculty, but we have a lot of adjuncts, and a lot of our maintenance work that's done on our online classes is done via a la carte payroll. And so for courses that haven't been touched in 5 or 6 years by students, we may not decide to maintain those. We may sunset those programs. And that's falling as part of the academic program planning led by the provost group. I'm very excited for that. The group already has a very aggressive deadline on campus that folks are rallying on. I want to make sure I do them justice very quickly. How they've leveraged it to me is that they've said, Mike, what we will see is that we're going to bucket our programs into 4 categories. What do we discontinue? What do we modify? What do we monitor? And what do we add? That covers the whole spectrum there. And the campus is going through and analyzing those results now. All right, last few items, and this bullet really doesn't do it justice, but scaling academic support. There's a bullet on here that says use technology better to scale. With the 9% enrollment growth, not increasing our staff. Say it's going to be 0, but we are looking to grow utilizing the same overhead profile. We've seen success in deploying certain technology better. Just an example, we've looked at our advising program, and advisors are using different sets of technology. Some students are really gravitating towards certain sets of technology where their enrollment rates are rocketing there. So using technology to achieve these goals, so we don't some institutional aid programs that we currently offer, unfortunately, in an effort to cost cut. And then our institutional overhead, like others have said, and Chancellor noted, is there is a hiring freeze. And necessary, we are very close in our administrative and UA support channels, and we do have savings associated. So we're not putting all our eggs in the enrollment basket. I look at it as two separate groups, but very much you have to look at both categories. Out of this, there needs to be. And with the capital funding plan, I put a bullet on there. Most of our focus is on our operating budgets, but Keith Epstein and I partnered together to speak about our capital funding plan. Technology folks are happy to report that we're able to save 20 to 40% of our annual. End of my presentation.
Thank you. That's pretty detailed. Questions by any members of the committee? I mean, got 5 pieces here and a great deal of information you're giving us. Appreciate that. Thank you for your time and your effort into this. If there are no other questions, did I know? Yes, sir.
Mike, I just want to say great job with really kind of putting this together and coming up with and giving us these bullet points of a lot of the things that Charter Oak is doing to make a difference. I know you guys have been working incredibly hard to try to right size the college, but you also have a new life and a new home now too, and really doing a lot to make those changes system, or at least in your system wide. So just want to give you kudos for that. Again, not perfect, but you're really working hard to get there. So thank you.
Thank you. Letting me off the hook easy. Thank you.
No, I'll be at your office. Yeah.
Yes, Jim?
I promised myself I wasn't going to say much today, but I just want to say that something struck me in these great presentations that we've had so far. And people talked about the need for greater enrollment, focusing on age, degree completion students, and the like. I would love, in my wildest dreams for the future, hear that Charter Oak and one or more of the typically more traditional colleges is collaborating on online instruction, and figuring out a way to use your experience, your resources to benefit the goals of the state colleges and universities, further expanding their outreach to different students or better serving some of the students they. That's a wish list item for me.
I think it's a great comment. And I would also comment that everyone sitting here, maybe one of the colleges, universities, or whatever, may pick up some points that might be helpful to them that they hadn't thought of because of all the great ideas that have come down from those folks that have already spoken. I say last but not least, certainly, we're going to be turning it over now to the Connecticut State Community College. Matt?
Thank you. So I believe it's afternoon. So good afternoon, Chair Ryan, Vice Chair McCarthy, Regents, and Chancellor Chang, and esteemed guest, John Meduco, President, CT State Community College. For starters, and before I hand the baton to my colleague, Carrie Kelly, I think it's really important to provide just a context of who is CT State, right? I think often there are a lot of misconceptions and misnomers that have been out there historically. So for starters, we are an open enrollment institution. Turn away no one. That is completely different than four-year institutions in the state of Connecticut. That's night and day. right? Like K-12, we accept everyone, turn no one away. Secondly, we served over 70,000 students this past academic year. 50,000 credit-based students and 20,000 non-credit-based students. We have 18 locations, including our headquarters in New Britain. We have over 4 million square feet of real estate across the state of Connecticut. So I think 9 out of 12 of our main campuses have suffered rain, water, flooding damage, right? So just do the math, that's millions of repairs that we're doing right now to be prepared for start classes. We serve over 6,400 employees, right? We were the largest college in Connecticut, so we dwarf UConn, their entire system. We're the largest community college in New England. We're the largest community college in the tri-state area. So scale and scope is simply different for us. I think that's really important just to kind of set that as the backdrop for often you hear numbers about drop for non-payment. People are alarmed. That's typical for large institutions. I believe we're around either the 14th or 15th largest community college in America. So we're massive. Secondly, we recognize and embrace the socioeconomics of our students, right? Urban, rural, and non-traditional. And also we accept that the aptitude and worthiness has always been there for our students. In terms of some of the metrics that have been used by CSCU, by conversations with Chancellor Chang, often it's iPads, and often you've heard today first-time, full-time students. Nationally, that is not the standard to assess community colleges in America. The reason being, first-time, full-time students for CT states less than 10% of students we serve. That will never tell you the full picture of what's going on, right? We serve about 70% part-time students. That's our bread and butter, compared to 76% full-time students for the CSUs. I think often using the same lens and measure cast aspersions on CT state, which simply just isn't accurate. Our retention rate, right, as of now is about 69%. So we're about on average with all of New England community colleges. And we're projecting we should be a point above the national average for community college, right? It's never been the aptitude or worthiness of the students. It's been life and social economics. Our employees, our students are the cops. Our students are the firefighters. Our students are the electrical line workers that are keeping the power on. They would love to be full-time students. They cannot because the majority of our students are employed. Majority of our students are parents. We can go on and on and on. So it's my responsibility to advocate for the community college of Connecticut to make it clear, like that's the backdrop of who we are. So with that, I want to pass the baton to my esteemed CFO. Go ahead, Carrie.
Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Kelly. I'm the Vice President of Administration and the Chief Financial Officer. We have prepared a slide deck for you today, so if we could advance to the next slide. Connecticut State Community College has historic structural imbalance. That means that costs increase faster than revenues. And there's two primary reasons for that, the revenue deterioration. It's been declining enrollments and the expiration of one-time funding. And by that, I mean both the federal pandemic aid, but also the temporary support that we've received from the state. And I'd also like to point out, much like my colleague at Charter Oak, we're uniquely disadvantaged by the new state fringe benefit swap. So if we go to the next slide, let me share a little bit about what that means. So historically, the state had funded all fringe benefits for our general fund supported employees. That means the dollars that we got from the state for the block grant also came with fringe benefit dollars. And that paid for all manner of fringe benefits. However, starting in fiscal year 24, this July 1st, the state is now picking up the piece for all funded employees, no matter what fund you're on, the retirement related fringe, leaving us with the balance for FICA, Social Security, health, and life. And so they made significant changes both on the expenditure side and on the revenue side. And so that's where it gets challenging comparing year over year what's happened. But if you go to the next slide, I think this lays it out. You can see that in the bottom row, this is the amount of support that we've had to pay out of our operating fund for fringe benefit support. So in FY19, it was $23.8 million to pay for the fringe benefits on an all funds basis for our employees. But it's starting in FY24, that spikes up to $46 million and it continues on. So although the state took on part of the burden for fringe benefits, they correspondingly reduced the revenue they gave us. And we believe they've reduced the revenue so significantly and left us with significant parts of the expense that we're uniquely disadvantaged. So in FY24, just to illustrate, that's 46.7 million. In FY25, it's 48 million. And in FY26, that's an additional, the same 48 million. In the current year, we're forecasting a deficit of $33.6 million. The amount of fringe benefit swap disadvantage that we've received is 46 million. So you can really understand the magnitude and context of how much this has hurt us. It's 53% of our forecast deficit in FY25 and 41% of our forecast deficit in FY26. Next slide, please. All this to say, Connecticut State College needs to achieve structural balance through deficit mitigation. Next slide. We've been working on deficit mitigation since last October, and the process is ongoing. First, we started by trying to identify our strategic priorities and areas of continued investment. We took a multi-year approach, eliciting recommendations from each campus and members of our cabinet. We're seeking to have revenue enhancement and enrollment enhancement strategies, but also expenditure reductions. We're evaluating everything we do through a lens that assesses the impact to our mission, to our students, to our employees, and to our equity principles. We're committed to being transparent and to upholding our principles of shared governance. Next slide, please. So the current year deficit of $33.6 million means we cannot maintain current services as we know them. We're working to minimize the impacts to students, employees, equity, and mission. Next slide. Our approach to resolve the current year forecast shortfall is to achieve $24 million in revenue reductions and savings targets. And we've assigned these targets to the campuses, including the headquarters out of New Britain. We anticipate using $9.6 million in reserves, and we're working in parallel to plan for FY25 and beyond. We expect that many of these strategies will be recurring and have benefit into the out years. Next slide. I think it's really important to point out where our expenditures lie. It's our staff, it's our faculty, the people who make our campuses such a rich and important place. But there's expense that comes with that. 78% of our budget is for personnel and fringe benefits. Only 22% is for other expenses. And of that 22%, 4% is for student financial aid, otherwise known as institutional aid. So that means 18% is for everything else that you can think of: lights, electricity, office supplies, instructional supplies. And so when we approach deficit mitigation, I think there's an inescapable reality that personnel have to be a significant part of the resolution of our plan.
And again, let me just add, I commend and respect the system.
Can't hear you, John.
So let me just add, I respect the fact that we are being mindful of travel. We're being mindful with food. But if you look at that slide, right, food is $390K roughly, right, and travel is $255,000. That's less than 1 percentage point in terms of our expenditures, right? It is people, and we care and love about our people. But this is the reality of CT standing. So often people look at the window dressing. And for us, we're looking at the meat and potatoes that account for our costs. I think that's really important, for not just this group that I know understands that, but it's really for the general public to understand just the split in terms of expenditures across those categories.
Thank you, President Madugo. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, we have tasked the 13 parts of our enterprise, the 12 campuses in our headquarters in New Britain, to achieve $24 million in deficit mitigation. We took an approach that recognized the inherent fixed costs of operating campuses, and we scaled the targets based on the discretionary portions of a campus's budget. So the largest parts of the enterprise The four largest campuses and at the headquarters of New Britain are bearing the biggest share. So you can see here expressed in the pie chart, each component part's percent of the $24 million burden that we're asking people to solve. Next slide. I think it's important that we have been working on this, to highlight that we've been working on this again since October. In February, we made some significant changes in the management structure through retirements, resignations, and eliminations of positions through non-continuation of contracts that culminated in the elimination of 7 executive positions. And when final, that'll realize $1.7 million in annual savings. We've eliminated 5 executive regional positions and 2 associate vice presidents. So these are things that are happening from the headquarters in New Britain.
And let me just add, when I started in June of 22, though it feels like 10 years ago, um, you know, they tell you follow the money, right? Look at the budget, try to answer the why. And when I started, it was bloated and looked something like Frankenstein created. I will be honest and blunt. You know, CT State had a region. CT State had 3 regional presidents. NetGR creditor never understood why we had a regional model. I did away with that within a month on the job, right? Everything was centralized, and there were projections that simply weren't true. I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but there was no rational logic when it came to we promised 18% year-over-year enrollment growth. And what planet? And we submitted that to everyone. You project 20% retention growth year over year. What planet? Harvard. They have 3% growth. That is a victory for them, and that's the richest institution on the planet. So there were things that were simply false. So we've been working actively to not only stop the bleeding, but really the stupidity of the original design that really put us behind the 8 ball that I don't know why, right? But again, put us in a bigger hole. And that's a shameful moment that I have to own because I'm at the helm of this. But I walked into a buzzsaw and I saw the detriment to our students and to our people. So again, right siding and pressing the reset button in terms of reality and what is true in academia, what is true for community colleges nationally is really going to help us turn this corner, right? So I really commend the difficult decisions that I have placed on my leaders in terms of we are making reductions starting with administration, but it was the right thing to do.
Right, until that end, there were a number of positions that were envisioned in the org chart to have been hired during various points last year that we did not hire as we changed the organizational structure, and that's what resulted in our uh, previous year, fiscal year surplus. Next slide. So I wanted to spend a minute talking about our reserves. We're very proud. Since 2018, we've grown the reserves by 55.2 million through prudent fiscal management. Next slide. But reserves ensure the stability of the institution. They allow an institution time to respond to changes in an economic environment. They sustain the institution through temporary revenue setbacks. They respond to unexpected costs. Also, they're there for unexpected opportunities. They're there to protect against unpredictable political behavior. But reserves absolutely cannot, should not, must not be used to fund structural budget deficits. When we look at the exemplars in this area, GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, GASB, they have benchmarks for the amount of reserves and cash on hand you should have. And so we cannot deplete our reserves for temporary reasons. We need to maintain them for the fiscal solvency for the future. So that concludes our report, Mr. Chairman. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'm sure we're going to have a couple of questions. I have a couple just quickly out of the box. You're not unique, by the way, and where your big numbers are, salaries and fringes. And I just was thinking of this, don't know if it's possible, but the legislature, the governor, the legislature, with OPM's input, made those changes as to how fringes changed in payment, particularly to the community college area. One of my thoughts is they're in session again in February. I would, and I'd be glad to go, sit down with some of the leadership, finance chairman, you know, if I'm fair, et cetera, and appropriations chairman, and higher ed chairs and find out if there is possibly another way of modifying that, massaging it, so nobody gets whacked the way we do right now, because that was a big hit that you took in particular, but universities also along the way. One of the other things dealing with retention, I want to make sure I get it out because it's important to me. I've mentioned it before, is the articulation agreement that we set up years ago. I've had calls from people. I talked to David Blitz, who also had read a letter from one of the students. We need to redo that so that students know I take 12 credits. They should be approved by Central, Southern, Eastern, and Western if they wish to go there. Not find out I've taken 12 credits and only 3 of those credits are accepted. And I've wasted not only time and money, but certainly all the effort that goes into passing those. So somewhere along the line, we as a board have to come up with, and I think I'm going to mention it to the, I'm mentioning it now, but I've mentioned it to him before, to the Chancellor, a way that we can set that up. This was set up before he was here. It's been here a long time. We have to do something so we can have some smooth transition of students from your facility into our universities. I think we'll get more students into the community college area, and we'll get more students into the universities that way. Everybody, it's a win-win for the students in our state and for the colleges and for the college and for the universities that we have here. With that, I'll throw it open to questions by members of the committee. Were you going, oh, no, you're looking at her. Okay. Yes, Aaron.
Carrie, thank you so much. And Dr. Manduco, thank you for being clear and concise about your deficiencies and where exactly those come from. I'm a pie chart fan. Thank you. Makes it very clear. But also, it's evident that you've been taking steps to do this necessary work for the latter part of the last year, if not more. And I just want to thank you guys for that. I feel like I don't want to say that I disagree with you about using reserves, but like I kind of almost do a little bit. But my question for you is, because I don't know, what is the recommended amount of reserves that you should have?
The recommended amount is 4 months of cash on hand, so that would be $161 million.
Oh, and you're not even there.
We don't have
Okay,
that
never mind.
presently. I think reserves are part of our strategy, and that's why we're
Yeah.
leaning back on them this year, because we really don't want to have such an incredible shockwave. We need time to plan. But I think we have to be very serious about changing our structural imbalance into the out years. If the level of funding that we receive from the state is not changed, the magnitude of the cut that we face in FY '25 is so great that even depleting our reserves isn't going to get us where we need to.
Agree. I was under the assumption that 100 million was meeting that where you're at, so forget about it. Never mind. Thank you, Carrie.
Jim? Oh, okay.
Sorry. Quick, really good presentation. Thank you. You alluded to some of your other work that's ongoing, that, pipelines, including the dual enrollment with high schools, retention strategies in supporting your students, workforce investment, which I personally think is super important, putting non-credit for students. Are these strategies, is it realistic to think that they can generate higher enrollment colleges?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're reading my mind. So let's start with dual enrollment. So Chancellor Chang and President Toro and myself attended the lovely back to school summit with our SDE Commissioner Russell Tucker. And there's a slide that kind of gave a description of dual enrollment for high school students in the state of Connecticut. CT State provided 27% of dual enrollment in the state of Connecticut. And that sounds like a big number, and it is, relatively speaking, for Connecticut, but that only represents 3% of our enrollment. When I was in Minnesota as a provost, when I was in Texas as a vice chancellor, 25% of our enrollment were high school students. We do not have a standard dual enrollment structure in the state of Connecticut. That is the game changer, right? And community colleges are the drivers of dual enrollment nationally, and we feel that our conversations that are aggressive with the CTEC system that they have 17 campuses of instruction. We have 17 campuses of instruction. They're all adjacent to each other. We'll be announcing a really big partnership this fall. We're working with SDE in terms of expanding that. We're working with, New Britain High School for dual enrollment, one of the largest high schools in the state of Connecticut. We are going to be aggressive in this space because I believe we'll see significant enrollment gains there. And I want to echo the sentiments of Regent Balducci. We have to do better in terms of transfer. Not it's again, 72% of our students are in 2-year degree programs. They want to go to a 4-year institution, and the best bet that we have in the state of Connecticut is the CSUs and Charter Oak, and we want to be champions of that. So we're going to go all in when in terms of these enrollment strategies that have been sitting there for decades. That we have to own and be aggressive, not only with our General Assembly, but really the superintendents and principals, mom and dad, to say, we want to provide an entryway to college for everyone based on our mission, based on our values.
The deficit mitigation strategies that you outlined, including some of the reductions, will that impede progress, John, Dr. Meduco, on what you just described? Because it's really exciting, and I do personally, I hope that we can play.
Yeah, Lord willing, no, I agree. Initially, it's going to hurt. Again, 36, 91, 118. These are massive numbers, and we have never. I know the media says one thing. We have never promised or guaranteed there would not be an impact to our services, but we're doing our best to mitigate and prioritize academic excellence, student support services, public safety, IT infrastructure, and our equity values. But I do think as we really venture down the road of dual enrollment and being the drive, right now, UConn is a leader of dual enrollment in the state of Connecticut. I respect UConn, but that's absurd. That's absurd, right? It should be the community colleges in the country like that. We're going for it, right? Because to me, now we can speak to the urban areas and the rural areas of the country that of the state, that they too can start college as early as freshman year, sophomore year. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough just due to the sheer size and volume of our deficit. But we would be ignorant not to really make the value proposition to the entire state in terms of just where we're not in terms of dual enrollment compared to the other New England states.
I hope we can make this case with our partner, state government.
And it needs to be made before the session starts, not after. And yeah. And Chancellor, you want to make a comment before?
Just very quickly, I wanted to say that completely agree with the focus on transfer. A deep analysis has been conducted, draft framework of plans for enhanced transfer activity has been put together by a transfer council that is a system-wide council comprised of the professionals that actually conduct that work, and that is being continued to work through. We hope to present some of that work to the in this coming semester. Further, I just wanted to corroborate what President Meduco was addressing, and I have the slides from that State Department of Education presentation that we saw. And so to President Meduco's point, CT State comprises 27% of the dual enrollment in our state right now. The CSUs, that's combined, the CSUs are 4%. Is 64% of dual enrollment in our state. So to President Meduco's point, there is a massive imbalance, and it is something that it is a top priority for me, and it is a top priority for our presidents. And so I just wanted to, we have this very much in our sights, and we will be focusing.
Any other comments, Jim,
Yeah.
you wanted?
Yeah, just a couple. One is, John, I take your point on scale, and I'm convinced that scale is the most overlooked variable, particularly for those on the extreme. Very large institutions are totally different, as are very small ones. So that point's well taken. And Kelly, I don't know if you can help me or I'm new here too, one year.
And I'll be really clear, I don't understand all the nature of the fringe benefit changes. So I'll start out by confessing ignorance. But was there something about that that uniquely affected the CT state in its employment structure? Or was it, I don't want to say simply, or was it the result of scale that make those numbers so big? Were you hit differently proportionally than the smaller parts of our system?
I think institutions that have a significant amount of staff or expenditure that is supported by something other than the general fund have more benefit from the new way the system works, right? So an enterprise that has a significant research fund or clinical operation fund like UConn would benefit significantly from this. However, the community colleges had most of their employees paid for by the general fund. And so now we don't get some of the other benefits. So the benefit really is happening to institutions that have significant amount of staff on something other than the general fund. So if they had a research fund, a clinical fund. And so I think that's what disadvantages us. But I look forward to an opportunity to really articulating that both at OPM and with the legislature, because I think it's a strong argument. I think we really need to be very clear about how this is uniquely disadvantaging us.
Yes. David?
Thank you. We can say a lot about what happened in the past, and I think Dr. Meduco has addressed some of the exaggerated claims which were made, not by this administration, not by this board, but by a previous one. And I refer to some of the comments and criticisms which the Faculty Advisory Committee has made on a number of occasions in past years precisely on those issues. That said, that's water under the bridge at this point in terms of dealing with the situation. But there are 2 points I want to make and questions. One is on the question of reserves. It's understood that reserves should be maintained, but the question is at what level, and in an emergency or crisis situation, what percentage should be made available over and above what might be nationally accepted norms. And that, I mentioned in particular the fact that there is, according to the June Finance Committee report, something like $74 million at the system office reserves. That is to say, distinct from all of the 6 institutions, of which a considerable proportion of that is available for operations. And whether that might be one of the partial measures that could be used to remediate some of the burden of the crisis, at least for the coming year. So that's my first question.
Yeah, that's a great question. We recognize that, this is a multi-year problem, right? We have a multi-year structural deficit, and just simple arithmetic, 33, 91, 118, right? We don't have the reserves to float that. We advocated hard during the legislative session. When OPM says you need to work within your budget, do not expect additional dollars for the biennium. We have to be fiscal stewards and think about not only this year, but also avoid mortgaging the subsequent years. And that's where we're struggling, because I agree with you. Again, Seth Freeman, our union, they are vocal. They've been vocal publicly. I get it, and I get the fear of harm that can be done. But again, I'm not losing sleep over this year. Maybe that's disrespectful to say. I'm losing sleep over next year, 91 million, in terms of what are we going to do if the state does not come through, right? And we have decrepit facilities. We have ADA issues on our campuses. For some reason, and the act of God and flooding has impacted 9 out of 12 of our main campuses, where some of our campuses are partnering with other locations to simply deliver instruction. So, there are simply the day-to-day needs that we have that our reserves will not cover that. So that's just been the challenging position that we're in. I can't speak to the reserves of the system office, but I know that I have the responsibility ultimately to make sure that I'm limiting the harm, if not doing no harm, year over year over year. And we are committed to that, but also in partnership with our shared governance bodies. Hence, we have not made decisions, right? We want to wait for our faculty to come back, have to sit down, be transparent, have them poke holes into everything we provide, and hopefully together, put forward some strategies for both expenditure reduction, but also revenue growth. And honest to God, that is the best response I have, at least for now, in terms of our very concerning situation.
And I do have just a second question. Unfortunately, I have to leave for an appointment immediately afterwards. So please take that not as a matter of disrespect. And that's a question of the EAs, the
Yeah.
education assistants. The information that we have is that of 700 of the EAs, already as of July 18th, 166 had not been renewed. And those are the least paid, most economically vulnerable members of the community, many of whom serve essential functions such as food pantries, evening telephone, et cetera. And I wondered, to what extent does this at all help in terms of the dollars required to remediate for the deficit, in terms of the impact on this most vulnerable group, and secondly, the lost services that they provided?
Thank you, Dr. Blitz. I wanted to point out the head count of the number of EAs that were reduced is 166. Those are folks who had previously had temporary engagements that expired, but some of them were never going to be coming back. They had moved on to other things. Some of them had come to work for us for a job that was completed. Some of them were working in a temporary position and they reverted back to an existing position on campus. And then some of them have been hired into a permanent role. So it's not really as though 166 people have not been part of the enterprise, and some, in fact, may be hired due to the seasonality. We didn't hire them yet, but right now in the startup to fall. But I would agree, this is a significant number of people. If we were to look at the number, the 166, and forecast what we had expended on those folks in the prior year, in this upcoming year, that would save $5.8 million for PS and Fringe. So that's roughly what the savings would be. But again, I think that number is just a snapshot at a moment in time. And there's a lot of nuance to what that count represents and reflects.
And let me just add, I know publicly, there's been a conflation of, the non-renewal of EAs and therefore the cancellation and removal of services, and that's never been true. Yes, our services will be impacted. We're going to have to adjust our hours and get really creative, but we're not eliminating libraries or tutoring or food pantries and et cetera. I just want to make sure that we are committed to maximizing every form of resource we have for the betterment of our students.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I have to leave
Yeah.
at this point.
Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, John, support you completely on this concept of reserves, because let's go back to the beginning of the meeting here. We heard about what can happen to what looks like a substantial reserve over 3, 4, or 5 years. We have an example within our system of what happens when reserves are eroded for 5 years. They end up being zero. And you can get to that point very quickly. So it's absolutely essential that we be very, very careful in the use of reserves and make sure they're available for things like floods that are, talk about unpredictable. But I think that it's just dangerous to think too much about delving into reserves. And we've seen on all the tables produced by all components of the system, that the projections for FY 25 and 26 still show substantial challenges that we have to meet. And our reserves aren't sufficient. There's not billions of dollars in the bank that can help us through that.
Another just comment, we talked about dual enrollment and what it was. Who is going to pay for that? The state?
We'll take all takers when it comes to who's going to pay for that. I think the one thing we've been doing is the analysis in terms of the cost, right? Like what's the cost of dual enrollment, and looking at different models like in Massachusetts, Minnesota, and elsewhere. Dr. Karen Heineck is our CEO of our Quinebaug Valley campuses. She also serves as my chief campus liaison. She was the architect of the dual enrollment program, both in Minnesota and Massachusetts. So I think making the argument that it has to be funded, but again, that is the entryway for more people to obtain college and get credentials, for workforce and beyond. Yeah, I agree. Someone has to pay for it, and we're not ignorant to that. Yeah.
Yes, Madam.
Yes, I do have a few comments. One thing is I appreciate, I've heard comments about collaboration. Put me here. Thank you. And opportunities to work with corporations. There are corporations who are willing to pay for courses. I know you and I talked about that one particular company in Torrington paid for courses for their students, their employees to go to Northwestern Connecticut Community College to receive some certification in manufacturing. So there are many, many other opportunities, and I know you're looking into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Per Chancellor Chang's leadership, I have the privilege of serving on the governor's workforce cabinet, and we talk about, revenue sharing and supporting costs on a weekly basis. So again, another strategy and opportunity for us for sure.
Then I know none of you have had the opportunity to have to relax lately, like I have, unfortunately forced. But I love your TV ad. It was a great TV ad. I saw it a few nights ago at 11 o'clock, and I'm thinking, "Ooh, this is pretty good." It was a community college ad for CSCU. So kudos to whoever
Yeah,
helped work
great
on
team.
that. It was
Great.
great,
Yeah.
and I commented to my grandson, who is a senior in college at a private university in DC. But he said, "Oh yeah, I saw that. That was a good ad." So let's face it, more of that. I had never seen the TV business aspect. So, there are people crazy like me who sit up and watch that with
Yeah.
a brace on their neck.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
thank you and congratulations on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments by members of the committee to go with you and Ellie? Appreciate your comments. I know you want.
This is partly my fault why we're here, so I have to say something. I just want to thank everybody, and just thank everyone for taking the time to help me personally today feel a lot more comfortable with where we're at and where each of you are going with the work that you're doing at each of the institutions. That as a regent, I get the questions from the parents and the kids and the students, and all they want to know when they talk to me is, should I send my kid here? Is the school going to be open next year? These are the questions that I get from the people that I talk to. But, as it was mentioned, I think, Mike, you're the one that said it, we can't cut our way out of this. There has to be a lot of collaborative efforts, a lot of thinking of new ways to generate revenue. And as a municipal finance professional, I can certainly appreciate that. Making 10 years of finding new ways to generate revenue, my specialty. And I just want to, I'm happy to hear of all the work that you're doing. So transparency is our friend here too. It's good and healthy to have these conversations in public. I think it's important for everybody. I'm sure all three people who are watching on YouTube, but it's important for people to see that and hear that. And I think important for us to have these conversations together. So thank you.
Chancellor, you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair Balducci. I just want to thank all of our presidents, all of our CFOs, all of our provosts, the staff, all the teams that have been working indefatigably for the last several weeks, but they've been doing that work for a long time. But now things have come to a certain situation and a kind of head. There are a lot of people at the system office as well, not just in finance and academic affairs, but in government relations and just keeping the machine running. And it's really a collective effort. And I just want to say to the regents that we really appreciate, and I genuinely appreciate that this kind of engagement and all the wonderful questions that not only help us be accountable, but also help us to tell our story in a very transparent way that has integrity. We need to do this. We are not shy about it. We have nothing to hide, and we are always going to be 100% honest. There is only one version of the story that's the truth, and so we will never shy away from an opportunity to tell our story and be nothing but transparent and honest with the regents, who, again, we know that you all take your responsibility as the fiscal stewards of this incredible enterprise with great seriousness. So thank you for your time and all your work.
Thank you, and I'll be the last to say thank you. I want to thank the committee. I want to thank members of the board who are here, our chairman who showed up and knows this was important enough, and we appreciate you, Chairman Ryan, and you, Chancellor, but especially to the college and college, I say singular, and universities for being here and with their thoughtful comments. I think it was really beneficial. It was a special meeting, but I think it was special folks here listening and those being given dialogue. And I think we're headed in the right direction. Hopefully, those people that helped make that decision as we move forward have either watched this or are going to get comments on it. And I can't thank you enough for being here and for this presentation today. It was much more than I had anticipated. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no new business to come before the committee. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion made, seconded? Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Okay, the committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Say this to both.